Luis Severino says he offered himself to the Mets at a discount this offseason. Should they have brought him back? And will he get his revenge today? I'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. The Mets lost on Saturday, evening up their series against the A's. It was a pitcher's duel, and the Mets just could not get anything going against former farmhand JT Ginn. Talked about him on yesterday's show, how this was the Mets' second-round pick in 2020, the guy they traded to get Chris Bassett prior to the 2022 season. And any Mets fan knows a former player, particularly a former prospect from the Mets that's on another team, it might have some success when they see the Mets again, particularly if they are unproven. Seems like the guys that don't have the track record even fare better in these such situations. And JT Ginn certainly did that on Saturday, but I don't think this was just Ginn lucking into a good start. This guy looks like a legitimate big league starting pitcher that has some real staying power in that A's rotation. He was outstanding. I mean, really, I did not watch this game and think, man, what's going on with this Mets lineup? I was more blown away at the arsenal from JT Ginn, because this is a guy, if you looked at the data from last year, he was throwing 92, 93 miles per hour on his fastball. Today, he was averaging 94.8 miles per hour, nearly a 2 mile per hour jump on his sinker. And that is a disgusting pitch. The ride he was getting on that two-seam fastball, just absolutely nasty. And his ability to go in on righties, to go away on lefties, to just throw that pitch and have it with pinpoint location on each side of the plate. It was a really impressive showing. He's got a good slider too. He just was outstanding. And I think he really set the tone for the A's and kind of carried them to the victory. The Mets had an opportunity in the third inning when Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto each walked, but Pete Alonso comes up in that spot, and you just think, all right, Pete's going to figure this out, get the job done. Had a great at-bat, fouled some pitches off, got himself into a full count. But ultimately, JT Ginn threw a sinker in on the hands of Pete Alonso, the hottest hitter in baseball, as I talked about on yesterday's show. And Pete couldn't get to it. It was the perfect pitch, a pitch that started in the zone and broke in on his hands to a place that he just couldn't get to it, couldn't get the bat on the ball. It was a great strikeout. And then Brandon Nimmo grounds out, and he got out of that threat. And then throughout the rest of the start, he scattered base hits. Mark Vientos got a single. Brett Beatty got a single. Hayden Sanger got another hit. But regardless, the Mets couldn't string anything together against Ginn. The only thing that they were able to do is put up one run as Brandon Nimmo hit a solo shot in the sixth. But that was it for the Mets offense. The A's bullpen was really good too. Mets almost got to Mason Miller, one of the most nasty closers in baseball, guy that throws well over 100 miles per hour at times. And he got the first two outs with ease, but then Tyrone Taylor got a base hit. And Luis Torrens hit one down the right field line that for a moment looked like it might stay fair and tie the game up, but instead it just hooked foul, and Mets were just unable to come back in the game. A's only issued 3 walks throughout the entire game. 5 hits allowed. Mets were 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position. I said it was a good pitcher's duel, though, because on the other side, David Peterson had a really nice start, had a bad fourth inning where he gave up a double and 3 singles, and that ultimately resulted in 2 runs scored. But that inning could have been worse. He was able to get out of it with minimal damage. And overall, he goes 6 innings, the only Mets pitcher that has done that this year, and he's done it twice. He allowed 2 runs on 7 hits, no walks, 5 strikeouts. I thought he was in command throughout pretty much all of his start except for that fourth inning. And even then, some ground balls found the holes. I mean, it wasn't like he got absolutely demolished in that inning. They just were able to put together some good at-bats and get some runs on the board. And then Jose Budo gave up a run on 2 hits in his 2 innings of relief. So Mets pitching didn't really struggle in this one. 3 runs allowed, no walks issued. I mean, it was a pretty good day for them. Mets lineup just went up against a really good starting pitcher that had a great outing, and then their bullpen looked good. So I don't really take too much from this game for the Mets. I really don't. It just sets up a really good pitching matchup today on Sunday with Kodai Senga going up against Luis Severino in what will decide the series. Mets bullpen should be fully rested for the most part. Jose Budo, the only guy that might not pitch. But other than that, Max Kranick, Huascar Brazaban, they are more than well rested. You should have all your high leverage guys, Ryan Stanek, AJ Minter, Reed Garrett, of course, Edwin Diaz. So the Mets should be in a good position to win the game if they can get a couple runs across against Sevy. One thing to note from this game on Saturday is Jose Siri may be out for a couple days. He drilled one off of his shin and had to be taken to the clubhouse on a golf cart, which was a whole other sideshow because it's a minor league ballpark and the clubhouse is behind the outfield. So they had to get him off the field, but then the golf cart ran out of gas. It was just kind of a wild series of events there. But the x-rays for Jose Siri were negative. With that said, he could have a pretty bad bone bruise that might still result in him having to go on the IL. He wasn't able to really, walk on that leg. He was really dealing with it. He said he felt like he had no power in it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Jose Siri day to day for now. I imagine the Mets probably just play a man down on Sunday. I don't know if they'll make that decision right away to, put him on the IL and call somebody up if they did, or when they do, if he does go on the injured list. The two guys in Syracuse that make sense, Jose Azocar and Gilberto Celestino. Azocar had a great spring, but he's not hitting that well right now. 222 average, 694 OPS. Celestino, on the other hand, is hitting 297 with an 813 OPS. Neither's on the 40, so you'd have to add either of them. So I think maybe it's Celestino if the Mets need somebody. But the real outcome from this is Tyrone Taylor should be the everyday center fielder until Jose Siri can factor back into the mix. I will make a little campaign here, a little pitch. Carlos Mendoza, do me a favor. If it is Tyrone Taylor, you don't have to start him every day of the week. Maybe let Luisa and Acuna get out there. I just think that Acuna needs to get at bats. And when you get Jeff McNeil back, if the ultimate decision is Brett Beatty goes down because he's not performing and because Acuna is a much better bench piece, giving you, a backup shortstop on the roster, the speed, that ability to pinch run, and a guy that you still think has more offensive upside than calling up a Donovan Walton, for example. And so your ultimate roster ends up being McNeil as your starting second baseman, and Acuna is that utility man off the bench. Steal him a start each week in center field. If he can start one game in center field and start a game at second base, at least he's getting in the lineup twice a week, and then you can try to work him in late in games and still have him get some development even though he is relegated to a bench role. So especially with Jose Siri out of the picture, I don't feel like you need to play Tyrone Taylor every day. I guess you might get the best version of Tyrone Taylor if he's getting all those consistent at-bats. But I think you can steal a start for Luis Acuna, who did start there at times last year in Syracuse. You can always replace him late in games and put Tyrone Taylor out there. If you wanted to, shift your alignment around, maybe late in the game, you might want to get Brandon Nimmo off his feet, and you could move eventually. I'm talking about when you get to Jeff McNeil being on the roster, you could slide Jeff McNeil out to left and put Acuna at second base. There's a lot of things you can do once McNeil comes back, but even in the meantime, I wouldn't mind seeing some lineups that had both Beatty and Acuna in there. Or just ultimately start Acuna over Beatty to give this guy some time. I just feel like he can't wither away on the bench. And I'd like to see, what has been a slightly more patient approach the last couple games that he's played. I'd like to see how that manifests itself over some more playing time. So we'll see if this opens up a little bit of an opportunity for Acuna to get out there in center field. Jesse Winker has been under the weather. So I'm curious to see if he's in there against Luis Severino. It'll also be interesting to see who starts at second base. Is it Beatty? Is it Acuna? We'll see. Brett Beatty got a hit in this game today, but still didn't look good overall in his at-bats. Did make some nice plays in the field, including a diving stop. That was a really solid play. But overall, I'm still not too impressed with what we're seeing out of Beatty. But let's get into the major topic of the show today, which is the fact that Luis Severino is going into this start with something to prove against Kodai Senga. He wanted to be back with the New York Mets. His comments about that were very clear to the media. I want to talk about what he said and if the Mets should have brought more of the band back together than they did and tried to continue some of that 2024 magic this season. We'll talk about that in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com to claim your $250 bonus today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 13,000 subscribers. We're nearly 100 away, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Now, Luis Severino got a chance to meet with the New York media at the beginning of this series, and he had some very interesting quotes. There was a funny exchange where Mike Puma asked Severino how many good hitters the Mets have, a play on what happened last year where Severino said the Yankees only had 2 good hitters because they only did have 2 good hitters, Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. But he was asked that question, and Severino played along and said a couple. But he was also asked about his free agency. And Sevy made it very clear he wanted to be back with the New York Mets, which is pretty much something we've heard across the board from all the different players that were on the Mets last year. You know, you heard Jose Iglesias beg and plead to come back. All the guys that did get to come back, Ryan Stanek, Jesse Winker, Pete Alonso, Sean Manaea, they all talked about how they had that desire to be back in blue and orange. And you got to imagine, the same sentiment was probably felt by Jose Quintana, maybe even Harrison Bader or Phil Maton. Who knows? Maybe JD Martinez, although he probably could have seen the writing on the wall. But the Mets couldn't just bring the entire team back. But they made their choices. They picked the guys that they thought would fit best to, take some of what happened last year, but create a new identity and a new team. Severino's comments were illuminating, though, because he said he would have come back at a discount. He ended up signing a 3-year, $67 million deal from the A's. Apparently, he offered himself to the Mets on a 2-year, $40 million deal. Sevy says, according to his agent, the Mets would have given him the offer they gave to Frankie Montas, 2 years, $34 million. So the question is, did the Mets make a mistake when they could have spent $6 million more and gotten Luis Severino instead of Frankie Montas and brought back a guy that was, a leader in that clubhouse, a guy that obviously fit like a glove and who had a lot of success for the Mets last year? It is an absolute discount compared to what he got. I mean, you're talking about $27 million of difference in guaranteed money. Obviously, that was over 3 years, the 3-year, $67 million deal he got with the A's. But still, you were taking $2-3 million less per season and a whole less guaranteed year, which is very valuable for especially a pitcher where you never know what's going to happen. And I don't blame Severino at all for taking the Mets counteroffer, if it ever was fully presented to him, of 2 years, $34 million and saying, well, that's about half the guaranteed money that I'm getting from the A's, and reluctantly signing with the team where he's got to pitch in a minor league ballpark. But, it's a tough situation to look back on because hindsight is 2020. Right now, Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea are both on the injured list. So at this present moment, who would be a better pitcher on the Mets roster and on their books? Clearly, it's Luis Severino. With that said, so far this year, it's been a mixed bag for Sevy. First start out, he looked great, 6 scoreless. Then the next couple times, not as good. He's given up 5 runs in each of his last 2 starts. Still giving length, 6 innings, 7 innings, but has given up runs. Granted, those starts have come against 2 of the best lineups in baseball, the Cubs and the Padres. Then again, his great start came against the Mariners. So it's hard to read into Severino's start to the season and what he could have been with the Mets, because also he talked about one of the reasons why he wanted to come back is because he really appreciated the trainers and the pitching coaches and how the Mets got the most out of him. And so maybe they'd have an even better pitcher right now than the one that is suiting up for the A's, but it's going to be interesting to watch him pitch against the Mets. And it is just an interesting thought exercise to think about what the Mets would look like right now if they brought back more of the guys from last year, because Jose Quintana made his first start for the Brewers 7 scoreless, something that no Mets starting pitcher has done this year. He went 7 scoreless against a really good Diamondbacks team in Arizona, tough place to pitch, allowed 4 hits, no walks, 2 strikeouts. Pitching to contact, doing his thing, Jose Quintana continuing to show that he is just a quality starting pitcher. Now, is that going to hold up the whole year? Of course not. Eventually, he'll have his bad starts, but it's easy now to look at, again, with hindsight and say, okay, Griffin Canning is getting $4.25 million. Jose Quintana is getting $4 million. Mets probably should have signed Quintana, but when they signed Canning, they couldn't have dreamed that they could get Jose Quintana for $4 million. And if they offered it to him at the time, it would have been an insult. But no market materialized, and that's what he ended up having to settle for. So I don't look back at the Mets offseason and those 2 starting pitchers and say for sure they made a mistake. But it is going to be interesting to watch how it plays out, because I do think there's a world, especially just because of the injuries, but even without that, where Severino and Quintana put up really nice seasons, and the Mets rotation might, need some starting pitchers at the deadline, and there is a possibility that those were guys that could have been more effective than the starters that they had. But I think the real one that you can second guess at this present moment is when we talk about Luis Angel Acuna and we talk about halted development because he should be in AAA. Well, there's a guy that begged to be on the Mets roster that would fit really nicely right now, and that's Jose Iglesias. Jose Iglesias is exactly what the Mets need to send Brett Beatty and Luis Angel Acuna down to AAA and have a better team. Having Jose Iglesias as the right-handed complement to Jeff McNeil again would have been ideal. With that said, I still understand why the Mets did it. And the season is long. And Luis Angel Acuna at some point might break out. Ronnie Mauricio at some point might break out. And I get why the Mets wanted to afford those guys opportunities. And I get why the Mets wanted to move away from the team they had last year. But at the same time, it is at this very moment the time where you can say that hindsight's 2020 and you can second guess some things. Because if the Mets had signed Severino, Quintana, and Iglesias instead of Montas, Canning, and, well, I guess there is no utility infielder that they signed, but instead of Montas and Canning, they would be a better team right now. There's no question about it. But come August and September, if Luis Angel Acuna is awesome, if Frankie Montas has come off the IL and he's pitching better than Luis Severino is, and if Griffin Canning ends up holding up and giving the Mets 160 innings of a sub-4 ERA, and Jose Quintana ends up eventually succumbing to Father Time and he has a rough year, it might have all worked out. And I'm not seriously second-guessing the front office. It's just interesting to revisit those decisions at this very moment, especially when Luis Severino talks about his desire to stay with the Mets. If the Mets had offered him 3 years, $51 million, would he have maybe taken it? Who knows? Who knows if that would have gotten close enough, if they would have deferred money and done what they did with Manaea. But I think at that time, they still had Manaea circled as the guy they wanted back. And they got down the road with Frankie Montas and thought it was a better opportunity than matching or even meeting what Severino had asked of them. So that's where the Mets are right now. And I still think they have every chance to beat up on Luis Severino in this game. You got a lineup that does know him well, and we'll see what happens. Pitching in a tough ballpark. Hopefully Kodai Senga gets the best of Luis Severino and the Mets win today. I also did pull the stats just to see on Harrison Bader and Phil Maton to see what the other former Mets are doing right now. Harrison Bader, funny enough, has homered 3 times for the Twins, has 10 RBIs on the season. With that said, only getting on base at a 262 clip, has a 737 OPS. It's better than Jose Siri, who's 1 for 20, but I wouldn't necessarily second guess that one. Phil Maton has been great for the Cardinals. Not the Mets need more relief pitching, but allowed only 4 hits, no runs in 7 1/3 innings pitched, no walks as well. And I will say, as much as Jose Iglesias would fit what the Mets need right now, he has not been playing very well for the Padres. Also hasn't been playing consistently, which could be part of it. Only has 5 hits in 22 at-bats, all singles, a 488 OPS to start the season. Granted, he did get a late start to spring, but the Mets are going to try here to win a series against the A's and continue on their road trip, where they will see Harrison Bader in Minnesota. We will talk on tomorrow's show about Kodai Senga and everything that we watched from this game, but I still have one more segment for you. It's one that I've had in the bank for a few days now. I told you I had a whole segment where Aram Leighton and I talked about Mets prospects, particularly pitching prospects. If you listen to Friday's show, we went all through center field, second base, a lot of conversation about some of the top position player prospects in the Mets system. I had him for a 4th segment that I've had saved, so I'm going to play that for you in just a minute. First, though, one more quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball and hockey playoffs are heating up. There's no better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than with Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you're in. You can even combine players across sports, so you can combine basketball with hockey and baseball and more, and for your chance to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Today, I'm playing Kodai Senga's strikeouts. 3.5. I took more for the projection. Jazz Chisholm projected for 0.5 total bases. I took more there, so if Chisholm gets a hit, I'm good. And also, I figured why not throw an old friend in there. Wilmer Flores has gotten off to a red-hot start this season. I took more on his hits, runs, and RBIs, also set at 0.5. So if Flo gets a sac fly, a base hit, or he just happens to score a run, that part of my lineup will be all good to go. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, so I got Aram Leighton back here to talk about some pitching prospects on the Mets. I'm going to throw 3 pitches at you. I want you to tell me which is the best pitch. We got Brandon Sproat's changeup, Jonah Tong's fastball, or Nolan McLean's sweeper. What's the best pitch?
Oh, man, that's really good. That's really good. I don't want to be too reactionary, but I think Nolan McLean's sweeper. And I will say, this was before the start of the season. If you just go by the tool grades in Just Baseball's top prospect list for the Mets, McLean's is the one that is above a 60 of those 3 pitches. So, and that was before I saw what it looks like this year. This dude is disgusting. That could be one of the best sweepers and it's just sliders in minor league baseball right now. To be throwing it at that velocity, it's the late break of it too, and he's throwing it like it's getting 3,000 RPM. This is somebody that has a innate feel to spin the baseball and is barely pitched. So like now seeing him pitch more and more and seeing how much more comfortable he's getting at spinning this baseball, it's got to be that pitch because I think it's only going to get better too.
Yeah, he flashed that 3,000 RPM in the spring breakout last year, and that caught a lot of people's attention. But again, he was still at that time a two-way player. He did have some fun in Brooklyn, hit some home runs. Like I think his OPS in Brooklyn was like sneaky good. Then he got to Binghamton and just got completely blown up for like.
I kept texting you like, when are they going to stop this? When are they going to stop this? And not because like I hated him as a hitter, but it was just like, come on, it's like DH power bat maybe versus like could be a number 2 starter.
He raked though, man. He raked, but that's what I was going to get to, the upside. Because if we were to compare upsides of Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean, how different are they? Because it does seem like Nolan McLean is tapping into even more upside. And I know I also just listened to you and Jack talking about two-way players now on the mound and how that's kind of like the new trend of, you want to get the best possible pitching prospects, find the athletes and get them on the hill. So what do you think about the comparative upsides of those two guys?
Yeah, the thing with Sproat's stuff is like if Sproat was around the zone a little bit more, I think you can look at it and say if you could dream on 50 grade command with Sproat, I think you'd say okay, that ceiling is still higher. But I just think it's probably a little too ambitious at this point. So stuff in a vacuum, I think across the entire arsenal, Sproat probably has the higher upside. But when you look at the pitcher, to achieve your ceiling, you got to execute, and you got to execute multiple pitches. And so when I see the athleticism of McLean now, I'm starting to say, okay, well, maybe this is a guy that could actually push closer to that ceiling. And, you mentioned the two-way player conversation. A lot of the best pitchers right now in Major League Baseball or up-and-coming pitchers in Major League Baseball are guys that didn't pitch a ton in college and were athletes and had this innate feel to spin the baseball and repeat their mechanics and are getting better and better and better every time you check in. Look at Spencer Schwellenbach, who's going to haunt Mets fans for probably the next 10 years once he gets a pre-arb deal soon too. And I mean, that's kind of the template you're looking at here, though. Is it going to be Schwellenbach? Probably not. That's like probably the 110th percentile outcome. But it's that template of this guy should not be this comfortable on the mound with this little experience throwing. And I do think with the diversity of the arsenal now, and he's gotten away from kind of trying to throw like a riding four-seamer, and it's more of this like heavier two-seamer that really works for him as well. The fact that he can get ground balls, and he's got this cutter that like 89 is disgusting, and then that sweeper as well, and then even the taste-breaking curveball and the changeup with him as well. Like he threw 5 in that first start. They averaged 17 inches of horizontal run. So like he's just scraping the surface here of what I think could be an insanely diverse arsenal. So I think he's getting closer and closer to Sproat. And like he was just missed top 100 at the start of the year, and I probably should have put him on there. And now like I think he could be the guy that in the update ends up just making the biggest leap from unranked to like pretty high up there in the list because we're just watching it in real time.
I feel like he was a guy that we all saw the sweeper as big breakout. We're like, all right, well, we'll try this starting thing for a year. If it doesn't work out, throw him in a big league bullpen, and he can be lights out there. But now, as you're seeing that more well-rounded arsenal, it does feel like a guy that should potentially be in the Mets rotation in a couple of years here. It seems like that reliever risk is kind of going away with all this new well-rounded arsenal.
And also just making a little bit of an adjustment to the way he's throwing that heater to where it's more natural for him. Whereas he kind of struggled to land the fastball for a strike as consistently as you'd expect. Where it was like, I think the final 10 starts of the year last year was like a 61% strike rate on the fastball. I think it's because he was trying to get more ride on it and just trying to create this four-seamer at the top because he's a low release guy. Average MLB release is about 5'9". He's about 5'1". The lower the release, the more naturally you're generally going to get that arm side run. And you think about just how your arm, and your hand angle is going to drop there and be more horizontal. So for him, I think he's just leaning into that more natural throw. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in this first start, he absolutely pounded the strike zone. It was 77% strike rate in that first outing of the year. So that's the other thing that really elevated him that I was not expecting right out of the gate. And we saw it even, I think in limited looks, just when I was able to see some backfield throwing as well. I think that's what's really going to help elevate him too.
The only question is once he gets to Syracuse, is he going to be able to pitch there? Can you give me any reasoning why there's not a single Mets prospect that can handle? Actually, Christian Scott did last year. That's been it. I feel
that's
like
it. What is the phenomenon going on? You texted me about that. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, if anything, it should be advantage pitcher. It's cold. Like that's how I like it. Like Sprout's a Florida boy. Like, I get it from that lens. Like I wouldn't like playing in the cold, but I mean, he was throwing late in the year, so it wasn't cold in September. His last start was better, so that was nice to see. But yeah, I think it was a little bit of more of the ABS being part of it and some starts for guys. And then just a series of unfortunate events with like Hamill's stuff backing up and Vassell struggling with the tighter zone and things like that. But it was weird to see all those arms stall out in AAA.
2 more for you. Jonah Tong. I know last year you were really high on Jonah Tong, and it feels like you've come back on it a little bit. Can you just kind of go through what your concerns are with Jonah Tong? And I guess maybe him just being a little bit one-dimensional with it, just relying on the fastball and needing to maybe find another pitch outside of just the curveball. Is that the biggest thing that you're looking at right now that's just holding him back?
Yeah, and it was really interesting getting to see him up close again, because I'd seen him in Brooklyn, but then being able to see it, it was a little bit easier at spring breakout just to get a close vantage point of the mechanics and the delivery. His it's a very unique delivery. It's almost like Tim Lincecum-esque to a degree. And I just think it's hard for him to repeat. I think that fastball is incredible, right? I mean, especially now that he's throwing it at 95, that could be a 70 grade heater. But yes, he has to rely on it pretty heavily. I think that he's cut into that though, and like the changeup development's been great, and the breaking ball is good. I just have concern that I don't know if he's going to be able to repeat that delivery enough to be able to go 5 innings and just turn lineups over. And then you have that fastball reliance, and I mean it's okay because it's so damn good. But that's the big wrinkle for me. And I know that he's made an adjustment to try to throw this like harder slider now, and that's helped, and that's given him another layer that I think is really good and can help. But even in the first start this year, we saw battling with command issues. He walked 5, struck out 5. And it was kind of the same story in that spring breakout game where it was like, when he's around the zone, man, it's nasty. But I just kept seeing different landing spot, fighting his mechanics at times. That arm path is really hard to repeat. It's part of what makes him so good, but I also think it's part of what makes it hard to potentially stick as a starter. I just think there's a fair amount of reliever risk here, but he's a big league arm, no doubt about it. And I think he could be a really fun relief option. I'm just concerned about maybe the chances of him moving off of the rotation.
No, that's definitely valid. And I think what you just said there about how much more difficult it is. If you are comparing two guys that I think are kind of similar in prospect rankings right now with Tong and McLean, like McLean's just so kind of effortless, free and easy. He's just able to spin the ball like crazy without even trying, it seems. And Tong, it does seem like it's a very high effort delivery. Yeah. The last guy to talk about is the best story with the Mets right now, which is Matt Allan. I know you actually, got to peek under the hood after his first start and look at what this arsenal was, because we haven't seen him pitch in 5 years, basically. What did you find from looking at his first start?
Oh man, it just made me happy. I can't imagine how Mets fans feel. I can't imagine how Matt Allan feels. So first and foremost, like, congratulations to him working his way back. I mean, that is mental fortitude right there, given his whole just history there. And it's crazy when you see, like, you're looking at the stats and it's like, the last time this guy threw was in the New York Penn League. That league's been dead for a half decade. Like, it's wild, but he was awesome. I understand it's low A. I don't care if he was throwing a bullpen to nobody. Like, the data was great. The mechanics were free and easy. And that's the other thing, you guys just maybe a little bit guarded. Like, he looked like the guy that was getting a lot of buzz in 2019. Right. And, the stuff, I mean, he 44 pitches here. He averaged 96 miles per hour on the fastball. And it wasn't just 1 inning. It was 2 2/3. That's like, he had 3 up downs and to do, or 2 up downs. So to be able to do that was really impressive. And then you saw the feel for the secondary is already there, which is another thing that, again, I was not expecting. I would have thought, like, okay, here's a ton of rust and it's fine. Let's see how things go. This cutter at 89 as well, that he got up to like 91. That looked really sharp, got some really ugly swings on that. And then he mixed in a couple upper 70s curveballs that it looked like that's going to need to take some time to find the feel for again. But man, if you could potentially fast track him as a relief option, it's a guy that we weren't even sure if he was going to be able to throw again. And if he's sitting 96, and we'll see if he gets more innings under him and maybe in shorter spurts, he could be back up to the upper 90s. Like, just for context, like instructs and at the alt site, he was sitting 95. So for him to be up to 96 now, and that was just his first outing, see if he holds it. But after being cut open 3 times, like, it's got to be extremely encouraging.
And, I think back then, if I remember, he pretty much was just like fastball, curveball. I think he's added that cutter. He's added a changeup, I believe, during this rehab process. And I know Jacob deGrom had Tommy John right after he got drafted, and it was sort of teaching himself how to throw through rehab, kind of taught himself how to pitch during that process. It seems like Matt Allan's had a lot of time here to try to figure things out. And it's really impressive that he's come out looking as good as he has. I think at this point this season, it's just keep the guy healthy for a full year. That's all that matters. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just decided, hey, we're going to keep the gloves on him, keep him really protected, but have him face tougher competition. Because I feel like at some point they're going to have him make a couple starts at that level, and just his stuff's just going to be too good for those hitters. They might have to move him along a little bit.
I'm excited to potentially go out and try to watch him. I imagine they'll probably try to stretch him out a little bit more. Maybe it'll be a couple more outings of 40, 50 pitches. But I think the fact that they already let him go 44 pitches that first time out. And the other thing that I was looking at was like, okay, did he hold it? Did he hold that velocity through the outing? And I think the adrenaline was pumping early. First pitch of the game was 97. The next pitch was 97. And I think he hit 97 3 times to Starlene Caba. But then you look at the final guy he faced, 96. Final pitch of the game was 95-4. So he held it. I understand it's not a ton of pitches, but this is a very unique circumstance here. I think you had to come away beyond encouraged from what that first outing looked like, and hopefully you can keep building on it.
Absolutely. I think maybe when you see Matt Allan, I might go out there with you, and we'll check him out.
That'll be how I get you to drive all the way out there with me.
Yeah, I'll go down. I'll go up there for Matt Allan. Thank you so much, Aram, for joining us. We'll put links in both of the shows with the top 100, the Mets top 15, and the video that you guys have in the top 15. You got the Just Baseball show, the call up, and justbaseball.com is where you can find all of Aram's stuff. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports today to check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team, league-wide experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.